Sing for Science is made possible in part by support from Science Sandbox, an initiative of the Simons Foundation. Today's episode was recorded remotely from Bakersfield, California and Oakland, California, and it contains content related to mortuary science that some listeners may find disturbing. Be sure to check out our other episodes, and please enjoy the show.
When I crack a head open, it was decomposed. The brain was liquefied. It was soup.
And it comes out the ears, someone told me. Sometimes. It kind of bubbles out the ears.
You cut into the skull and you crack the skull cap off.
It's soup.
It's soup.
And then there's something called frothy purge, which I love lingo. I love the lingo of science. And there were some great ones. Frothy purge. You got your plain.
Oh.
Yeah, right. The bubble's coming out.
Frothy purge.
You got your plain purge, your frothy purge.
Dead bodies everywhere. Dead bodies everywhere. Dead bodies everywhere. Dead bodies everywhere.
Welcome to Sing for Science, the show where musicians and scientists talk about music and science. I'm your host, Matt White. Each week we'll talk about a song by our guest artist and how it connects with our guest scientist's area of expertise. Today we'll be speaking with Jonathan Davis, frontman of the pioneering metal band Korn. Korn's most commercially successful album was 1998's Follow the Leader, having hit number one across 4 charts and sold over 14 million albums worldwide. The album's 4th track is called Dead Bodies Everywhere and was inspired in part by Jonathan's job working in a morgue before his music career took off. Also joining us is best-selling popular science writer Mary Roach. Mary is the author of a string of one-word science books including Spook, Bonk, and Fuzz. The first in this series is 2003's Stiff, The Curious Lives of Human Cadavers, and won Mary several awards and critical distinctions. Her reporting not only details the unique scientific contributions of the deceased, but also provides elaborate explanations into the process of tissue decay and how mortuary science works to stall it. The title of this week's episode on the podcast is Dead Bodies Everywhere, Postmortem Biology and Funerary Science. Hello, Jonathan and Mary. Thanks for coming on the show.
Hey.
Thanks for having us.
You know, I don't consider myself a morbid person, but this is a dream come true, I got to tell you. I mean, I've been trying to find a reason to have both of you on the show for a while, and when I found out that you, Jonathan, used to not only work in a morgue, but also wrote a song related to that experience. So, I mean, the whole thing practically writes itself.
Or a couple songs about that, about working there.
What was the other one?
There's one, Pretty.
Oh.
That was when I worked it was an intense case. When I worked at the coroner's office. We can get into that later, but there's that. And then the dead bodies was overflow in the morgue when I worked at the mortuary. So I worked both.
Okay, so I mean, Dead Bodies Everywhere kind of spells out pretty clearly what it must have been like to work in a morgue. But I mean, you know, I know there's more to the song than just about that. I mean, can you?
Yeah. But it was my when I worked at the mortuary, my kitchen was overflow for the morgue. There's literally dead bodies were everywhere. When the morgue was full, then we would put some more into my kitchen, which I had a little apartment in the mortuary. When we had too many bodies, or too many, bodies were backed up. We're waiting for funerals. After we get done embalming them, they would have to put them on on the tables, and they'd sit there waiting to get dressed and put in the caskets and all that stuff like that. So sometimes we get a lot of cases, and then my overflow was my kitchen. And literally, I come out of my bedroom and there's dead bodies everywhere.
Holy shit.
It's good that they were embalmed already. That's good.
Yeah. You don't want to, no. Decomps are not fun.
And so was this in Bakersfield?
Yeah.
Because it's hot there.
Yeah. It's hot, but they were embalmed. Once you're embalmed, they're fine.
Were you still a teenager when you had this job?
I first started doing post when I was 17 years old, yes.
Oh.
And that was at the coroner's office.
Okay.
And then from there, I graduated high school and went directly to the San Francisco College of Mortuary Science.
Oh, I went there.
Yeah, I went.
Was Mac there?
Mac was my chemistry and teacher. Yeah, he had like a.
Oh my God, Mac!
He was rad. He had this big kidney stone that he in his class that he said that they took out or passed. It was ginormous.
Oh my God!
It is. That place was awesome, and it was on when it was at Divisadero. I think it was on
Yeah,
when I went, and then eventually they moved the school to the mortuary I worked at Riley Company. It was on Dolores.
yeah, and
So they moved the school to actually the classroom was a bedroom I slept in when I went to the college there.
wow. Yeah, it closed in like 2005 or something.
Yeah, I know it's no more, but I went there. It was pretty intense.
I knew that there was going to be a gazillion points of connection that I'm sure will.
It's a small little clique, man.
Yeah, it's a small industry. So how did you get drawn into that world in the first place?
I just always, since I think I can remember, I was always drawn towards darker things. Those things intrigued me, and still intrigue me. I love happiness and light and all that stuff too, but also there's the dark. And at that point in my mind, I was like thinking, oh, when I was in high school, I went to this thing called Regional Occupation Program, and they had the coroner's office as one of the things you could go do. A lot of people were studying to go be X-ray techs or respiratory therapists, but I chose autopsy assistant.
Wow.
And I ended up, but it wasn't like, oh, school, go just jump in there. I had to go through 3 different interviews and go through a psychological back. I did all this stuff, all these different interviews and all this stuff to be able to do that. And I went through and I passed all of them. And I started my junior year of high school as an autopsy assistant for the county coroner's office.
And so do you remember your first autopsy?
Like yesterday, I'll never forget that was like when you came face to face with mortality right there. It's like, I think, and I learned it in college, that America is a death denying society. We all think we're going to live forever.
Sure.
But when you're staring death right in the face, and this wasn't a very nice one, this was a car accident, and this person was pretty beat up, it really shocked me. And I'll never forget the sound of a scalpel cutting flesh. I'll never forget the first time I saw the viscera laying there, opening up in a Y incision and seeing the viscera all there. I'll never forget those things. Doctor going there, taking samples, and then me having to sew them up. I just like, it really affected me.
I mean, how could it not?
It's just reality, man.
But dead bodies everywhere. There's another component to it. There's it seems like it addresses your relationship with your parents.
Yeah, because I was like, they wanted me to do this or that. Like, you need to get a real job, that kind of, just the normal stuff parents do. Because I'm a parent, I want my son to be successful, my sons to be successful, and they just wanted me to get a normal job.
Yeah.
And I'm not normal, I guess what they call in those terms. I chose to be a mortician or an autopsy assistant because in my heart, I wanted to be a musician. But they were pushing me, no, you can't, you're not going to make it as a musician. You need to have a real job, that kind of vibe.
Yeah.
They kind of like pushed me into that, and then in turn, and I've always said this, I shouldn't have been doing autopsies at 17 years old. I shouldn't have seen the things I saw at 17 years old because it really messed me up. I had nightmares for a long time. I had all kinds of stuff that I had to work through because I was subjected to this horrifying things that I saw at such an early age. But no one knew at the time, and I was really enjoyed it and lying on myself, but I saw some really bad stuff I shouldn't have seen.
That was, what, 5 years before your first record?
So yeah, I graduated in 89, went to mortuary college 91, and then, so then I got into Korn 93. Then I went back to work at the coroner's office part-time, so in between that time, and then I left, yeah.
That's crazy.
I worked at the mortuary, let me see, 89, went to mortuary college 91, 92, 93, I was doing my apprenticeship at the mortuary, and I was a volunteer deputy coroner and doing autopsies sometimes when they needed my help.
Right.
And then my apprenticeship ended, and I got the opportunity to go try out for this band. It turned out to be Korn, and I just left it all behind after that.
Yeah.
I chose to go with my heart. What I really, really wanted to do is be a musician.
I was just looking at your last tour. I mean, you guys are still doing arenas. I mean, not many people get to do that.
I'm very lucky to be doing. I'm just 28 years.
That's amazing.
And I'm still playing sheds, amphitheaters, and arenas, and I'm very, very lucky. I know this.
It's incredible, and what's interesting is, and I seems like you acknowledge that you've always kind of been drawn to the darker elements, and I dug up this profile of you guys, or maybe it was just a view from Melody Maker, maybe late 90s, and they. they call you a quote an icon for the disturbed and dispossessed, and they, which kind of tracks with someone who might have had a job in a morgue, but they also they talk about your performance, and it seemed like very I don't know, kind of like it was talking about the way that you were on stage and you were kicking, and it was kind of a withdrawn way of seemed like you were processing emotions. And I watched a recent show of you guys, and it was like there was something so incredibly life affirming about it, and open and positive. And not to say that the former maybe didn't have those elements, and I realized that was a much different chapter in your life, but I think it's worth remarking on that you're able to kind of combine those elements, and you're still singing songs called Dead Bodies Everywhere 28 years later.
Yeah, man. It's the way I've dealt with everything I've been through in my life. I've ever had a very happy life, and now it's amazing. I mean, but I think it's like everybody. We have our ups and downs, and I choose to do my art on the darker stuff in my life, and it really moves me. So when I get up there and sing those songs, I'm just letting loose.
Yeah.
I let loose. I just go somewhere else. I let all the emotions come out, and then when I'm done, I just kick back, and I'm happy because I don't have any of this stuff built up inside me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just how I've felt. That's how I figured out how to get through my life.
Well, it's a beautiful thing to see,
Thanks, man.
And so it sounds like maybe to some degree you're able to compartmentalize a lot of these interests. I mean, do you still have some interest in mortuary science?
I mean, I collect all kinds of stuff. I still love mortuary science. I have a bunch of old mortuary equipment and stuff like that. I love medical preparations. I collect those old ones, old quack medicine stuff.
Like snake oil stuff?
Like the Violet Way, where they was like, you could, there's all these different ones. There's these, it's stupid, but I got like these, just quack medicine stuff. This is a perfect one. These crazy box of rectal plugs that are supposed to help you cure asthma and insomnia. Just funny. I love that old quack medicine stuff.
Bougies. They call them bougies.
Is that what they're called?
Well, those are the rectal dilators, and they would sell them in kits. Like they'd get bigger and bigger. Like you could have the advanced rectal dilator.
Yep. Once you graduate.
Wow.
After so long. Yeah. It's just stuff like that. I like to collect. I have a bunch of like haunted artifacts and all kinds of just stuff. More than just macabre stuff. That's just, it inspires me, and I love being around it.
What's your source? Like, is it on eBay? Do you look for that kind of thing?
This stuff finds me, man.
Yeah.
I swear.
I bet, I'm sure.
It really does. I don't actively go looking, but most of the stuff I found, like my haunted doll stuff like that, is because I go around like town, and when I'm on tour, I go up and I ask, what is the one thing in here that makes you feel the most uneasy? And there's always something, oh, come here. That. And I buy that. And I bring it home, and I don't know, it's a bunch of collection of just misfit toys and all kinds of stuff, but somehow they like it here.
Yeah.
It's inspiring for me. If you believe it or not, it's just, I love sitting here looking at my dolls and my stuff. And
You mentioned dolls, and it's like that guitar line in this song. I guess it's a guitar line, but it just sounds kind of like that creepy abandoned playground horror movie thing.
Oh yeah, that's through a wall, through a talk box.
Oh, okay, interesting. So, have you ever scored a horror movie?
Not a horror movie.
No.
The one I scored. I guess it wasn't a horror movie, but The Queen of the Damned.
Oh, right. Okay.
Movie is the one I scored. That's not really horror, but I did a couple movies, and then it's kind of like I'm cool just making music. It's not something I'm trying to go do all the time.
No, for sure. Jonathan, were you familiar with Mary's book? Had that ever come across your desk?
No, I'm always on the road, and I rarely have, because I'm full-time dad. I just came from my son's football game. I have so much little time to myself to just sit down and read. When I do, it's mostly my time when I have just free time. I like to play video games a lot because that's my I don't know, something helps me. I can just unwind and not think about stuff. I just play a game. But no, I definitely want to check some of your books out.
Well, this one is an amazing book, and it's definitely probably one. I got it for Christmas when it came out in 2003 or 4, and it's still I mean, not surprisingly, one of the most memorable books I've ever read. I can still retell certain passages. So, Mary, what stands out in your mind from, because, exhaustive research went into this. You're visiting morgues, you're visiting crash tests with cadavers, you're visiting this body farm, which is insane. What stands out in your memory 20 years later?
I think probably, I guess the body farm, but I was going to say the very first chapter I reported was at the mortuary college that Jonathan went to, and it was the first time I'd seen a body, other than I had a job as a janitor at the college where I grew up in high school. I was a cleaner. But one time I got assigned to the morgue, but those bodies were all under these kind of clear plastic kind of tarps. So which was kind of creepier in a way because it was dark. It was after hours, and I was like with my broom, and I'm like, that's kind of weird. So that's actually technically the first dead bodies I've seen. But the one that I saw, the one that they were being trained on was a body. It was a reject. This guy had donated himself to medical science, but he was rejected because he'd had an autopsy. So he's got this, he's like, his torso is just like a gaping red hole. And I'm not prepared for that. And I'm like, okay, yeah, with the viscera bag, but without the organs, they're in the bag, and it's just this blood red shell. And I realized years later, because for a few days after that, that image kept popping into my head. And I was thinking, maybe this book wasn't such a smart idea. Maybe I'm not okay with this. But, 2 days, 3 days later, the images started going away. But that is, I realized much later, that's something people with PTSD have, that where these really gruesome things like that they've seen pop into their head. I don't know if you ever had that, Jonathan.
Yeah. I did a lot because I autopsied babies and toddlers and 5 and 6 year old children. I did an autopsy on this little boy, and we opened up his stomach and found a bag of raw cocaine in it that he ingested.
Yeah.
I saw just things that, like I said, that it still gets to me. I have children that just like
oh my God.
I became such a I had no feeling, and I hated that. I had to have no feelings, or I would have went insane.
I know this woman I met years later. She's the medical examiner for Oakland, California. We have a lot of pretty grisly crime here in Oakland. And she said, okay, I think she made it a personal goal to make me gag, which I had never, people would say, did this book, did you ever throw up? I'm like, nah, I'm not squeamish. But she brought me in, and there were these, I don't know why I'm telling you this. That really wasn't the question. But there was these 2 people who'd been found in an apartment after, I don't know, they were very bloated. They were big people to begin with, and they were in that bloat stage, and she cut them open. And the smell.
Oh, that's the worst.
Oh, my God. I mean, I gagged. I've never gagged in my life. I think of myself as somebody pretty macho when it comes to things that are gross. I left the room, and she was like, what's the big deal? It's just like changing a diaper. I'm like, no, it's not. I'm sorry. No, it's not.
No, it's
anyway,
not. Smell that smell. It's horrible.
Because at the time, I wanted possibly to do this book on natural disasters. And so I was going to train as a volunteer with the sheriff's department and the coroner's office and help her so that I could be her assistant should something come up. Anyway, so she's like, you need to come and volunteer. And that was the end of that. That was like after the largely bloated people and the smell. I'm like, no, I can't do that.
And in your book, you describe what is at the root of that smell, that putrid smell. I mean, and you give a pretty good description of it. I mean, I've never smelled anything beyond like dead roadkill. Thank God. But could you talk a little bit about that? What's going on there? That's
bloat is the, what's going on basically is that when you die, your cells have these enzymes, and they, they need to break things down so they can use them. And when you die, these enzymes sort of break down the cells themselves. So all the liquid in all your cells kind of leaks out, and you get sort of gushy, and there's a lot of fluid going everywhere, and bacteria love that. So the bacteria are going crazy, and the fluid's making its way to the parts of the body where there's a lot of bacteria, the guts. Once the guts open up, and there's just this crazy bacterial feast. And bacteria, when they're eating, they're like you. They break things down, and a fart, basically, they produce gas. As you do when you eat and digest. So they're digesting, and they're releasing tons of gas, which builds up, and at some point your interior organs may burst, and so there's just a lot of room for the gas to be going everywhere. So the things that tend to be bloating are places where there's a lot of bacteria, like the scrotum and the mouth and the gut. So there's certain parts. I haven't discussed this in a long time. I just reread it. I just reread the chapter after so many years.
Glad to give you the venue to do so, yeah.
Yeah, no problem. It's all coming back to me. Anyway, that's what's going on, is that and putrefaction is just more breaking down and liquefying. And at the body farm, you would see in the advanced stages of putrefaction, just kind of like a puddle all around. I compared it to, like, in The Wizard of Oz, the bad witch is melting, just becoming this pool.
Yeah.
So you're just becoming liquid, except for, of course, you're depending on how dry it is, your skin and bones take longer. That's the last thing to go. The wetter stuff is, like, the brain goes, the eyes go fast. The wet stuff goes first, and then the harder stuff takes a longer time to break down, and there's bugs that help with that, and sometimes rodents. So, the whole thing ends up getting broken down, though, one way or another.
So could you tell Jonathan about the body farm, what the body farm was?
Oh, sure. The body farm is a place at University of Tennessee was the original. That's where I went and stiff. There's like 4 or 5 others. They're kind of like Starbucks. They're everywhere. They have them in different environments, because it's a place to study the forensics of human decay, and that is something that is used to try to solve crimes. Like, say you have a body and you want to figure out how long has this person been dead, how long have they been lying there, and in order to understand that, you got to figure in a lot of factors. To figure it out, you need to factor in the temperature. Was the body wet? Is it dry? Is this a very humid place or a very arid place? Was the body clothed? Was it naked? Was it in water? All of these things affect the timeline of decay. So they study that, and that information informs the criminal forensics process, the process of figuring out how long this person has been dead. So the body farm is a place where they study that, and they've been doing that for years. Because it used to be, sometimes they were way off. Wow. And then a body would be discovered, and they'd say, yeah, this looks like 6 weeks. And it would be like 25 years, because it just depends on, sometimes bodies are naturally preserved by the environment. If it's very arid, they kind of mummify, and they don't look soupy, and they don't, break down completely. So anyway, that's the body farm. But what I loved about it is that it's this beautiful little patch of land, like off beyond the medical center. It's got hickory trees and squirrels, and it's really, like, you walk in, you're like, oh, this doesn't seem that bad, and then they're like, oh, there's a guy taking a nap over there under a tree. And they're just placed here and there, kind of like, it doesn't look like a scientific facility. Like, there's a guy lying under a tree, and they were studying the effect of clothing that day. So he's wearing, like, sweatpants and a sweatshirt, and it really just sort of looked like a guy napping, except that weird stillness that dead people have.
And so they're kind of grouped by where they're at in the process of decay. Was that right?
Well, it depends on what they're studying. Like, there's a section where they have their dermestid beetles, which break down clean bones. So they're at that they were. I'm not sure if they were processing. They were cleaning skeletons for some reason. There's like the neighborhood of skeletons. And then the other ones, they were, like the clothed guy was under a tree, and then there was a woman. You would kind of walk through they weren't arranged in any. It was like, what's your project? Kind of stake out your land, and some of them had a covering to keep scavengers out, but most of them were just kind of lying there dead.
Wow.
Yeah, Jonathan, you would love it.
I would actually. That's cool. Oh, wow.
And there's one in California. There's one in the Central Valley because they want them in different, like they would want like a dry, arid place and then a humid place. So there's one in the Midwest. There's one in New England now, but the original was in Knoxville, Tennessee.
Wow.
There was this thing you talk about. About the. Earlier you mentioned that like the brain and the eyes that those go pretty fast because they're so liquidy, and so what happens? There's just a vacant spot where the eye once was. You describe them as X's in the book.
Yeah, the eye it does have that kind of like the pupil because it kind of collapses, so they don't have that dark black area. They kind of just look. It's very weird. But the brain, I thought you were going to ask me about the brain, and I wanted to ask Jonathan if this.
The brain, when I do decomps, when I crack a head open, it was decomposed. The brain was liquefied. It was soup.
And it comes out the ears, someone told me. Sometimes. It kind of bubbles out the ears.
You cut into the skull and you crack the skull cap off.
It's soup.
It's soup.
And then there's something called frothy purge, which I love lingo. I love the lingo of science, and there were some great ones. Frothy purge. You got your plain.
Oh.
Yeah, right. The bubbles coming out.
Frothy purge.
You got your plain purge, your frothy purge. Oh my God, I don't know how you did it.
Oh my goodness.
I asked this guy at the mortuary college, Theo. His name is Theo. I'm like, how did you decide to get into this? And he said, well, when you this is back before pagers and cell phones. He said, you could have a free apartment upstairs from the mortuary because you had to be there on call when the body came in.
Yeah.
So there was like free room and board. So I was like, that's how you decided? He's like, yeah.
When I went to college, I got free room and board. Well, I had to buy food, but I got a free room and woke up and went to school all day, came back, and I just had to do removals at night. We were on call, so we stayed and lived in the mortuary.
What was the process of removals like?
Well, you get a call, you'd get the address, and you'd go pick someone up who'd passed away. I mean, there was times where it's tricky, especially in some of the places in San Francisco and the Mission and all that. I got a call, and I went, and this was a really big person, 200-300 pounds, and I couldn't get him. And then we had to go down a spiral staircase. Because there was no way out because those old buildings, the way they're built. So we had to strap them on there, and we had to get family members and other people in the building just to help. I think one time we called the fire department to help get them out and get them into the car. And then once I got them into the removal van, take them to the mortuary. How am I going to get this? There was always this, how am I going to get this person out? But then there was other ones where it's really simple. You'd go in and it was just an easy removal. And take them into the embalming room and leave them for the embalmer to come, because I couldn't embalm then. I was just an apprentice. Or I was just going to school. I wasn't even an apprentice yet. But when I worked at the other mortuary, when I was an apprentice, when I was embalming, I had to have the embalmer there with me to watch me.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just apprenticeship you have to do for 2 years.
You mentioned you started to talk about embalming, which is one of the other things that I'd like to talk about here. So what do you remember about that process?
It's just like you're replacing the blood in the body with embalming fluid, which is formaldehyde and other chemicals.
They look so much better. Oh my God.
Yeah, and it gives you color.
Yeah.
And pink
it's an
color.
Amazing transformation.
It makes everything, it freezes everything. So when you touch the skin, there's none of this.
Right.
It's just like hard as a rock. if you do it right, and how it depends on the pressure, how much you're getting into capillaries and the tissue, how much you massage. So basically, real short, if it's not an autopsy, you make an incision right here on the bone right here, and you dissect and you get the jugular and the carotid artery, right? You'll inject into there using an embalming machine, which acts like a heart, and you're going to pump that fluid into the body and use the jugular vein. You have a pair of forceps. I have a pair of them around here somewhere, and you go down the jugular into the heart kind of area, and you're pulling the clots out. You just sit there and leave that vein open, and you let the embalming machine do its work. It's going to pump the embalming fluid in and push the blood out. And while that's going on, you take and you cover the body in soap and you start massaging. So if you're shooting down in the blood, you're going to start massaging up from the hands because you want to get the blood out. So you're going to massage the entire body. You're going to try and get the blood out of the body and get the fluid in, so it gets into the capillaries and it totally gets and saturates the tissue with this formaldehyde, which then what is the word? I'm sorry, I got brain fart. It sanitizes the body and totally preserves it.
Kind of an amazing idea to use the human circulatory system to get that fluid everywhere, like to all your cells. I mean, it's brilliant, because I don't know, the mummification is kind of like, you pack the body in something and you maybe stuff some down the mouth. But this to have that idea to pump like a heart, like Jonathan said, you're getting, replacing the blood with this preservative that prevents, it kind of links the proteins together. It basically keeps bacteria from being able to break the cells down the way they normally would. It also kills them. But that's a brilliant idea.
Yeah.
And so the jugular, is that the same thing as the aorta?
No, that's your heart, the big
The aorta is in your chest.
heart artery.
It goes all the way down into your...
What's the jugular? This is a vein, right?
That's in your neck.
Jugular's a vein.
So yeah, the jugular's your vein. So your arteries,
Carotid is the one that goes into
the carotid arteries right there. And then the jugular is when the heart's pumping the carbon dioxide blood, I call it, out. So you're going in through the carotid and out through the jugular.
Well, Mary, in your book, you talk about it looked like the end of a whoopee cushion, right? It was that wide.
It did to me. That, like, the guy Theo, he raised the artery. I think it was the artery. It was either the carotid. Yeah, the carotid. And to me, it looked like
they're connected together like this.
Yeah, but the end of it to me looked like what you blow on a whoopee cushion. I mean, it's big. It's like a gronkin' big tube.
Yeah, they're two tubes. It's hard. You got to dissect them apart. And that's if they haven't been autopsied. Now, if they're autopsied, it's a total different thing, because the pathologist has gone in there and just ripped everything out. So there's no circulatory system. So now you got to inject. If you can find the carotid, you'll shoot up just for this side of the head. You'll shoot down here in these arteries here just to do the arm, and you'll shoot down the arteries of the legs to get that. So you got to go do 5 points. You're doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 points of injection.
Because you don't have a closed system anymore.
You don't have a closed system. Oh, and also once you get done embalming, then you have to go in with this stuff called cavity fluid. And it uses giant trocar. It's called a trocar. It's a giant spike. And you have an aspiration tube. So it's sucking. It's like a suction. And you go in there and you pierce, and you just try to make mincemeat of all the organs inside, so they can't blow up, like she said. When they start to come down, they'll start to fill up full of air. So you poke everything, and you just make it all mincemeat in there. And then you stick it in there, and you take the suction tube off, and you put cavity fluid, which is like an even more intense formaldehyde. And that keeps it, preserves that in there. If not, and then the autopsy, you just take cavity fluid and you open up the plastic bag and you just dump it in there.
The embalming fluid, does it ever rupture a vein when it's being pumped in and end up just in the entire...
I mean, you can do what happens if you're not paying attention. Sometimes there's clots that get in there or something. You got to watch the pressure. You can distend. You can blow someone's face up really big, or they'll start to swell. So you got to really watch that.
And then what do?
You got to watch, and you can see it start to happen, and then you stop.
Okay.
And you try to get out there and pull the clot out, or you just stop there because you don't want to distend a person's face this big. Like if you do a cadaver, Cadavers are like, I don't know how many. I think it's like double the amount of fluid you would use, or triple the amount of fluid you would use on a normal embalming, but there's no drainage. You just blow them full up.
Wait, what's the difference between a cadaver and, I mean, what distinguishes a cadaver from another?
Research, like for anatomy lab, you're basically like mummifying those suckers.
That's what a cadaver is.
Yeah, you super embalm. This isn't for cosmetic. This is just to straight preserve them.
Normally, correct me if I'm wrong, Jonathan, embalming is to keep the body looking decent for like an open casket. Like it doesn't have to look good for a very long, a couple days.
Yeah, for a couple
but if
days.
you're going to have an anatomy class that's a whole semester, that you just mummify that sucker.
Really intense and formaldehyde.
I did another interview with a cardiologist who also talks about working on a cadaver, so I could be mixing this up, but you did visit with an anatomy context, right?
I was at the anatomy lab at UCSF. Yeah.
Wait, that's separate from the...
That's not the College of Mortuary Science. That was a different chapter. Yeah.
And what was that experience like? What do you recall from that?
The stench of formaldehyde. I mean, really strong. So strong, and it's pretty toxic stuff. So at a certain point in the semester, they would cut the legs off because they were done, partly, but also to lower the amount of exposure to formaldehyde. Because it's like, and so it's not a pleasant smell. I mean, it's. But the other thing was just kind of. What was I found kind of fascinating was not something in the lab, but the fact that, and this is much more common now than it was back then. This is one of the earlier schools that actually did a memorial service for those cadavers. Like all the students, they got together and I think family members of the cadavers and the students read these tributes, and I mean it was kind of moving, because initially I heard, they're doing a memorial service for the cadavers, and I was picturing like caskets with the bodies, and I was kind of like, I got to see this. But it was in fact just the students, and it was very touching. They were very kind of grateful, and the things that they wrote were pretty moving, as opposed to back in the very early days of teaching anatomy, where you were encouraged to make jokes and to like pose the body with a cigarette and with your arm around them. That was kind of like a way of coping back then. But now that's seen as
totally a way of coping.
Yeah. I mean, humor is a way of coping, and that was kind of the standard practice. These days, there's a much more of a emphasis on respecting the gift of the donor, et cetera. They did a good job of doing that. The day I was there, people seemed very respectful. Who knows? When I'm there with a notebook, so nobody's going to be, jousting with legs or whatever.
But you very effectively at the beginning of the book, I don't know if you're able to recall any of it right now, but you set a tone, because I realized that like you fuse humor in popular science, and that's the tone you use. But I think you really kind of you establish a tone of respect at the very beginning of the book. Do you remember what you said? I mean, I can find it.
No.
if you can.
What I said in the. No, I don't remember what did I say, Matt? Tell me what I said.
Oh, here it is. This book is not about death as in dying. Death as in dying is sad and profound. There is nothing funny about losing someone you love or about being the person about to be lost. This book is about the already dead, the anonymous behind the scenes dead. The cadavers I have seen were not depressing or heart-wrenching or repulsive. They seemed sweet and well-intentioned, sometimes sad, occasionally amusing. Some were beautiful, some monsters, some wore sweatpants, and some were naked, some in pieces, others whole. I think that was very artfully done.
Yeah, because people would say, "Oh, you write about death." Sometimes people would want like, "Oh, we're doing some show about death." I'm like, I don't know anything about death. I didn't write about death. That's totally different to me. The world of cadavers. I mean, they look like people, but they're not. They're dead. This is completely equally interesting, but just a whole different thing. I couldn't really write about death, or maybe I could, but I don't really want to. But it's a very different thing. I mean, the dead, and there is humor. I mean, I was spent time at it's a school where it's in Michigan, in Detroit. What's the name of the university? It's not coming to mind, but it will shortly. Anyway, they do a lot of automotive safety testing. They use cadavers to calibrate crash test dummies. They were coming up with a new, like a side impact dummy. And I was there when they were doing one of the impact tests with the cadaver, and they had to get this guy, this dead guy, who had a number, UM006, I think. University of Michigan, this might have been. Anyway, they he had to sit in a car seat, and then the impactor would hit him on the shoulder, because it was, they were trying to calibrate a side impact dummy. So he's sitting, and they had him, he's a dead guy. So he can't sit up, and they put him in the car seat, and he kind of slump, and then they'd like tape him up, and then they'd be all set, and they'd have a lot of, the strain gauges were all set, and they've got the camera set, the video, to get the slow motion footage, and everything's ready to go. And then he'd slump again. And it was hilarious. I mean, it was late at night, everybody'd been there a long time. And he really had comic timing, this dead guy, and he's wearing like a leotard, which looks bizarre. And it was funny, not at his expense. It's lovely that he donated his body. It was kind of heroic of him. And but there is humor in being dead. You're useless. Your limbs are flopping all over. You've got bubbles coming out of your ears. I don't know. Just why not laugh about it?
Jonathan, do you make, in your attraction to darkness or the macabre, do you make that distinction between like what we've been talking about with the kind of your interest in mortuary techniques and science and actual death and the loss of life and end of life, things like this?
I guess it's like two different things. It's an art, what we did with mortuary science. Yeah. Basically artists. But also if you're just an embalmer, which there are some just straight embalmers, just all they do all day. But I worked at the funeral home where you were an embalmer and funeral director. You had to deal with the family, and then you had to go embalm them, and then go do the funeral and everything. And doing that all the time, dealing with death, is very depressing. It's not fun waking up every morning to family after family grieving over someone they lost. Because when you're in the morgue embalming somebody, you totally respect the body. It was someone's mom or dad, but you don't know their story. You don't see their family. You don't see any of that stuff. So you're like, okay, let's look at this older person had a great life, or it's a young kid. Oh, this is horrible that this happened. And I go about my business and I'm going to do my job. But when I see the family, like say the kid that's in there, I see their parents distraught, crying. They just lost their son, their grandparents, all their friends just crying and grieving over this person. It wears on you, man. Yeah,
that's got to be the hardest part for sure. That's got to be so much harder. Even
that's a total different thing. Dealing with the dead, yeah, it's horrible. That's the worst part. Yeah, but I mean, I wanted to be an embalmer, but the funeral home I worked at, I had to be everything. I was the apprentice. So I'm out there mowing the lawn, digging ditches for sprinklers. Oh, go embalm this person. Go do this. I was doing everything. So I saw everything. What I really wanted to do is just be left alone and let me do my gig in the back in the morgue, and I didn't have to see no one or do anything. That would have been perfect, but...
Did you have to do the whole conversation about the...
Yeah.
Yeah, you did. Wow.
Yeah, I would sit in. They were teaching me that to be a funeral director, and how that they, the whole thing is how their wishes, how which casket they're going to pick, and how they wanted it, what the religion was, what priest, either a priest or a pastor. I mean, there's so many different things. And
did you do preparation?
Did I do what?
Like preparation, like making them, sewing the mouth shut and putting the, eye things in the eye and all that.
To make everything.
Eye caps.
Yeah, eye caps. I did the eye caps. And if you either use the staple gun where they wire the jaw shut. I was an old school guy. I would just suture it, and that's just going up through the lip, through the nose. Yeah. You just suture it and you tie it up like that, and then you just use eye caps.
I have an eye cap.
Oh yeah, I got a couple of those. I even actually have some screwing, like for trocars, right? You get a trocar button. That's where they would seal that, but I have a rectal one.
Oh my God.
I didn't even know they made those.
That's rare.
I wish they had those because I had to manually sew up a couple buttholes in my day.
Right. Well, you talk about that in your book, Mary, because there's leakage.
That's right. Yeah, the day I
'cause
was
there's
there, they were
leakage,
doing the
so-
demonstration, and they're like, "Well, for this guy, we probably don't need to suture the anus, because he's not going to be because they're like, well, and they look at me like, unless the visitor would like to see it. I'm like, I'm good.
Yeah.
No, you don't want them leaking in the casket.
Yeah, no, you don't. But I used to use this restorative clay, or they call it tamponing, and you use forceps and cotton, and then you seal it up with this clay,
Oh, a butt plug.
and that kind of worked good. So you didn't have
You
to.
could have used one of your bougies.
Yeah, it was kind of like an old school. But now this plastic trocar.
Plastic what? What's it called? Plastic what?
It's this plastic. It looked like a trocar button. These little trocar buttons were these little buttons, and that you'd screw them into where the hole was, where you stuck the trocar in.
Okay.
And it would seal it up, so nothing would leak. But they made them for anuses.
In what? 19th century?
No, I mean it's now.
Oh.
They're new. When I was in a mortuary working, they didn't have them.
Yeah. Okay.
They didn't have them at all. Now you just screw that thing in, and it's threaded, and it just threads like a screw, and it's totally sealed. I wish I had that back then. And it can be used vaginally, anal.
Yeah, they didn't have that the day I was there. They were talking about just needle and thread, like they did with the mouth.
Yeah, you'd sew the things up, but now, things I wish I had back then.
Yeah.
But things worked out different. I'm glad I'm a rock star. I didn't have to do that anymore.
Did they have a crematorium at the funeral home you worked at, Jonathan?
No, but I'd have to take bodies all the time to the crematorium. It was another mortuary
Okay.
who had a crematorium. So they'd be put in a plastic. We'd make these plastic like coffins,
Yeah.
not plastic. I'm sorry, cardboard.
Yep.
And place them in there, and then put them in the hearse and take them to the crematory, and we'd pay them for their service, and then I'd pick them up in a plastic box, take them back to the mortuary, and then they'd be transferred into their urn that they bought.
Oh, okay. Well, that also Mary goes into the process in the book about cremation, which was pretty wild, and it includes that bodies sometimes sit up. Mm-hmm. Do you remember that, Mary?
Oh, they sit up. It's like a straw. If you put a flame to a straw, you're going to see it do all this weird crinkly. It's the heat. They'll pop right out of the box, sit up, and you just see them start breaking off. It's weird.
Because you could look into the oven while it was happening.
Yeah, you can see. There's a little hole. If you open it up, you can see it and watch.
They have to have the viewing window for, is it Hindu families, or there's some religion where you have to observe the body as it's being cremated.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
I'm not sure. I forget which.
Speaking of Eastern religions, Mary, you bring up something in the decomposition. It was the 9 cemetery contemplations, the Buddhist Sutra on mindfulness. Do you recall this one?
Well, I do remember that I do remember bringing that up, and I don't remember the words to it, but it was it's a meditation, and like you're supposed to meditate on. Oh, that was a charnel house or something. Were you supposed to go to I forget where you're supposed to go, but you're supposed to meditate on
a charnel ground.
the decomposing body, the process of death. It's a Buddhist kind of way of teaching oneself that the body is not what matters, and the impermanence of the body. And anyway, I don't know. I don't have it in front of me.
Well, there's stages to it. I've got it. I do. It's got you say apprentice monks are instructed to meditate on a series of decomposing bodies in the charnel ground, starting with a body, quote, swollen and blue and festering, progressing to one, quote, being eaten by different kinds of worms, then moving on to a skeleton without flesh and blood held together by tendons. The monks were told to keep meditating until they were calm and a smile appeared on their faces.
Oh, it sounds like the Body Farm.
So there's that route.
Oh,
Yeah, I know.
Body Farm.
So we've just got a few more minutes here. Is there anything else that that we should cover? I mean, this has been the most unique recording that I've ever done in the dozens that I've done on the show.
So rad.
I
It's
can't
amazing.
believe it's almost over. I'm
Yeah.
so sad.
I love it.
You know, Jonathan, the one thing that when I mentioned at the very beginning, the thing that always sticks with me that I remembered from when I first opened this book on Christmas morning was you talk about the first or some of the earlier recorded research on dead bodies. And it was after in the French Revolution, those that were beheaded in the guillotine. And that like, there was some guy that was like running them the heads down to his lab to see if he could Frankenstein them or something. Is that
yeah.
right?
Dude, it's this guy there. It's in Paris. His name's Fragonard. So the Fragonard heads.
Okay.
And so I've held one. There's a whole museum in France, and nobody knows how he preserved them, but he would dissect them right down the middle, and they're perfectly preserved. They're like mummified, and you can just see and hold one and see just a perfect, side view of the heads, and
Like the bodies exhibit.
like the body exhibit by Gunther von Hagen, I think his name. This was, I think Fragonard was doing. It was plastination. That's what it's called.
Wow.
He was doing this way back before all that, during the guillotine time. So,
Wow.
like I said, I love medical preparations. I collect them. I love just like the. There's a place in Philly. Oh my God, what am I?
The Mutter Museum. The Mutter
The
Museum.
Mutter Museum
Yeah.
is one of my favorite places to go.
Oh my! I know the curator and the director. So anytime you want to behind the scenes, they got some good stuff behind the scenes.
I knew the lady. I used to go when. What was her name? She passed away though.
Gretchen Warden. Yeah, Gretchen Warden. She died around 2004. She was the one who really.
Yeah, Gretchen.
Yeah, she would bring preparations on the Johnny Carson show.
Gretchen's the one that would let me go in there. I don't know the new people yet, so I got to meet the new people because I love that place.
Oh yeah, well we should go together sometime. Yeah.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, yeah. It's Anna Doty is the woman who's running it now, who's got a real taste for the macabre.
There's some really cool pieces in
That's
there.
the thing that's got like the distended colon wrapping around several rooms or something like that.
The megacolon,
Megacolon.
yeah, the megacolon. It's got the megacolon, yeah. It's
Yeah.
in this beautiful case, and it's very quiet in there. Because if you go on a weekday, there's nobody in there, and you just sort of, it's kind of meditative. There's the colon, and it's big. It's as big around as I am. That is a big ass colon. Yeah.
It's huge, and they got
So yeah. Chang and Eng.
Chang and Eng. Their bodies are in there.
Oh God! And then they'll be like just the weirdest. Like this is a jar of skin that this woman would pick off her body, and she like sent it to them. I thought you might want this. That would people like send them. There's a necklace made of hemorrhoids. That might be not on display. That might be in the back. But I mean, it's just.
You got to go in the back. There's some crazy stuff in the back.
This makes me think of, Jonathan, this might be another merging point for your interests and also your career as a musician. There's an out-of-print book about the investigation into Elvis's death. And there's like seriously detailed descriptions about the autopsy and specifically his colon and which had a lot of pharmaceuticals.
I had a chapter on that.
On Elvis's body?
I interviewed his doctor. I have a chapter on megacolon and extreme constipation, and I went to see Needles Nick before he died. Yeah.
Dr. Nicopolis?
Yeah. I hung out with Dr. Nick. I tried on the hamburger ring that Elvis had made for Mrs. Nicopolis, which has diamonds in all the colors of like a hamburger and the bun and the pickles. Anyway.
Wow.
I had a chapter on that. The megacolon. Elvis had Hirschsprungs. He had Hirschsprungs.
Oh yeah, it was like something like 6 feet of undigested pills or something like that in his.
It was rock hard.
Wow.
And when Nick told me this, he like knocked on the stone of the fireplace. Goes, it was rock hard, like this.
Wait, so Nick was allowed at the autopsy?
Well, I don't know if Nick was at the autopsy or he heard about it. I don't know if he was. I don't know. Probably he was his doctor. He was his personal doctor, so probably he was there.
I know.
Anyway, sorry.
Wow.
Sorry,
that's wild.
I interrupted you.
No, that's cool.
I talk about Dr. Nick all day. Well, that was an interesting book, and it goes all into the investigation and the autopsy and stuff like that.
I've read that. Yeah, I've read that book. Yeah.
I think Geraldo Rivera is involved for some reason. Anyway, this has been so incredible. I really appreciate this, and I will edit this and release it, I believe, the second week of December.
This was awesome. I love. You know what I have to go through. This was really cool.
This was the best. Yeah, I could have kept going. Thanks. It was great to meet you, Jonathan.
Very nice to meet you, Mary. Hopefully we cross paths sometime. Be awesome. We'll go to Muted together.
When are you on tour again? I want to go to one of your shows.
I just got done, so I'm off for the year. But I think my first gig in is starting in April, but probably 2024 in the States, I think. I'm not sure. Yeah, things pop up. You'll never, I think, I mean, maybe I got a couple this year in the States, I know, but we're not announcing them. But sometime. You're in San Francisco?
I'm in Oakland, California.
Oh, you're in Oakland. Okay.
Well, yeah,
Perfect.
I want to go sometime. I've been watching your videos and you know the video for the worst is coming. You know the news that
The worst is on its way.
the worst is on its way. Sorry, I hate when people fuck up my titles. That's why they're one word. But that to me kind of had like the images almost reminded me of embalming.
Yeah, it kind of has that.
You know, in the video. Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably like, you know, a virus coming for you. But anyway, it had that kind of like stuff going through the. Yeah, it's cool.
It does. You know, we did this one song called Adidas, and if you watch the video, you'll see we're dead in the video, or a car crash, and we're all dead.
Oh wow.
And it was inspired. Some of the stuff was inspired by the coroner's office. You'll see them taking my clothes off, and I'm wearing a bra and a garter belt and panties and stuff. You know how many times I had some big buff burly cowboy looking dude, right, died, and it's called processing. I got to take their clothes off and weigh them and stuff.
Yeah.
I take their clothes off and they're wearing women's lingerie underneath.
Whoa.
Or they had their junk ligatured up. Or always there was humans are the weirdest, darkest creatures. The things I saw, we could do a whole nother hour. But yeah, it's crazy.
I'll tell you this one story. We took out, my wife and I took out our first mortgage last week, and we were at the bank, and the bank's attorney, I don't know how we got onto this topic, but he started talking about like the effort to steal Lincoln's body and how Lincoln's casket is like sealed in all this concrete. And then we started talking about bodies. Maybe I was preparing for this, and he started telling me how he was involved in a case where they took a funeral director to court because they discovered that in between the funeral and when the casket was buried, this guy was dressing all the bodies up as clowns with the wigs, with the nose, makeup, big fucking shoes, the whole enchilada. And so they had to exhume all these corpses and take them out of the clown outfits.
Wow.
Oh my God. This didn't make the media, did it? I think I would have heard about
He's
that.
a real sicko. Well, so he's in jail.
Oh my God.
That's there's being in the business, people did all kinds of weird shit to bodies.
When my father-in-law died, there's this cheesy sweatshirt that he always used to wear, like Rainforest Cafe or something. And like when you look through photo albums over the past 20 years, you know, he's always wearing that freaking sweatshirt. So when he died, we brought the sweatshirt. We're like, dress him in the sweatshirt. Like, no, you're not putting a suit on him.
Good for you. Yeah. Well, thanks again. And you know, have a beautiful weekend. This is Halloween weekend. This is perfect. This is happening right now.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
All right.
Well, take care.
You guys all take care.
Bye,
Okay.
JD.
Bye,
All right.
Matt. Thanks.
Good night.
Thanks, you guys. Good night.
Good night. Thank you. Check out Korn's line of Freak on a Leash pet accessories at freakonaleash.com and their Here to Slay hot sauce at heatonist.com. A new edition of Mary's book Stiff was just released, as was the paperback version of her book Fuzz. For excerpts and more information, please visit maryroach.net. Sing for Science is co-produced by Talkhouse and made possible in part by a grant from Science Sandbox, an initiative of the Simons Foundation. Our music is by Panoram. Social media manager is Bailey Constas, and digital producer is Keenan Cush. If you liked today's episode, please tell a friend about the show and give us a review and some stars. For more information, go to singforscience.org and follow us on social media at Sing for Science. Thanks for listening.